Good morning, good afternoon. Nice to see everyone. I'm very excited about the session because we're talking about getting things done, what it looks like. I'm Maury Piper from George Mason University, but I'm visiting here in Belgium at the moment and looking forward to the sessions also tomorrow. We got 45 minutes, so I will just be on the clock a little bit compulsively, but I'm really looking forward to the conversations. So let's see, we have Jan, we have Marcia Lorena, we have Greg. Okay, excellent. Good to see everybody. Let's just jump in then, because we're talking about how things really unfold in practice and how we adopt these models to make them work. And we start with materiality assessments and how they can be used to define organizational sustainability priorities, taking into account the sustainable development goals. So let me turn it over to Jan from Antwerp.
Thank you very much, Mari. Hello, everyone. How is the energy level, I would say, at the end of the day? I'll give a short presentation about an article, a paper that we are writing or finalizing at the moment, related indeed to materiality assessments. I will share some slides with you, but I'm also happy to discuss further. So let me check here. Indeed, I'm part of Antwerp Management School. At the moment, I'm based and working in Kigali in Rwanda. It's also interesting how they see materiality here and how they engage with stakeholders. So I'm learning a lot at the moment. Just short, so I work for the Sustainable Transformation Lab, and there we also try to research a lot on the topic of stakeholder management and materiality assessments. We also work together with some companies on this matter, and one of these companies is Johnson & Johnson, actually Janssen Pharmaceuticals in Belgium and the Netherlands. And this case is also used in this article. The article is, this is the title of the article, A Material World, How Can Materiality Assessments Be Used to Define Organizational Sustainability Priorities While Taking into Account the UN SDGs? A long title. I work together with some colleagues, as you can see, from the University of Antwerp and Antwerp Management School on this research. In the paper, we actually want to look into four topics, well, four dimensions: build further on existing materiality assessments that don't really look into the SDGs, provide a necessary context to the concept of materiality by presenting the various perspectives in academic literature, but also more and more in gray literature, and then present the application of the method for one organization, as mentioned, the company Janssen Pharmaceuticals in Belgium, and provide an outlook for future research projects on this topic. I will quickly go through it. And of course, this is nowadays a very hot topic. Moreover, since yesterday, the challenge of double materiality. I'm sure you all know this by now, but how can we define material topics from a financial point of view and from an environmental and social point of view? For example, how has climate change has impact on an organization, but on the other way around, also the impact you have as an organization on the climate. So this idea is still, as we also do research and work together with a lot of companies, and also for example, for Janssen Pharmaceuticals, a very difficult one. So the challenge of double materiality is there. And in the article, we actually frame a next challenge, which is called triple materiality. And here you see, for example, the sustainability manager of Janssen Pharmaceuticals, and she's writing down the challenge of triple materiality. And actually, when we are actually in conversation with her, we try to define triple materiality, and actually it builds a little bit further on double materiality by looking into the inside out and the outside in impacts and risks in the context of sustainability thresholds. And the difficulty about this is how can then you define the sustainability thresholds? And I think their materiality assessment can definitely have an added value. And therefore, we also build further on this idea by also looking into the SDGs. Now, if I continue, there are different ways we try to research this. We actually started already in 2019 with document analysis, but also with interviews and with a survey. Next to then the participatory action research with the company Janssen Pharmaceuticals. We executed a national survey research in Belgium through a collaboration between us, the University of Antwerp, and Louvain School of Management. And we obtained several insights into the SDG landscape, and a specific angle of that was also looking into materiality assessments. Do organizations in Belgium use that? How do they use that? Do they use the SDGs in materiality assessments, etc., etc.? Now, following that research and following document analysis and literature research, we built further on the work of, and you can see it here, a few very interesting papers, articles, and we propose 5 steps for what we call the SDG materiality method. With step 1, improve the accountability to all stakeholders. So the idea also to look into silent stakeholders, for example, the environment, future generations, etc. Step 2 is about stakeholder identification. How can you map stakeholders? Do you use the classical impact influence idea, or do you use other ideas on that as well? How can you identify your stakeholders, map your stakeholders in a good way? Step 3 is going further than only consulting stakeholders, but also going to dialogue with them. And this is something we really did with Janssen Pharmaceuticals, where they found it very challenging to go one step further than only consulting them, but really going to dialogue with them. Step 4 is about taking into account the double materiality principle. And step 5 is how can you embrace also societal thresholds? How can you look into the SDGs? How can you integrate the SDGs in your materiality assessment? I'm not going to detail in every part of the study, but as mentioned, we looked at the company for an application of the SDG materiality method. We worked together with them for the last two years and a half to define materiality from the classical approach, single materiality, to look into the double materiality approach, but also experimenting a little bit with triple materiality, where we also look into how can the SDGs be linked to the materiality approach. So we also ask this to the stakeholders after mapping them, after consulting them, and going to dialogue with them in several deep dives. So this actually, the result of this is some material topics in line with the SDGs, in line with the material topics they defined in the past, and also looking into societal thresholds in line with the main SDGs that come up. And we're now actually helping them with fine-tuning their sustainability strategy while taking into account this information. Now, finding so far is that with the survey we did, we had a total of 368 organizations across several sectors responded to the question, does your organization perform a materiality analysis? Which 210 organizations completed the question, does your organization align the materiality analysis with the after an exit route? And when diving into these results, we see that no more than 12% of the 210 organizations perform a materiality analysis, align their materiality analysis with the SDGs. And also 14% indicate that they do not account for the SDGs at all in their materiality analysis. So these findings show that 41% of the organizations take into account the SDGs to a certain degree. Of course, when you then look into what does it mean a certain degree, we'll come back to that in the conclusion. But speculating on these results so far, it may be the case that organizations do not yet think about coupling the SDGs to their materiality assessments, experience difficulties maybe in practice, or generally lack the knowledge for relating the SDGs to the sustainability topics that are relevant to them. Further, we, by interviews and looking at the application of the company case, we identify around 3 main determinants for the SDG materiality adoption, which is external forces, management support, and features of the SDGs and Agenda 2030 for SDGs, for sustainable development, sorry. I can go deeper on that maybe in the discussion afterwards, what we mean with these things, but maybe I also like to go towards a preliminary conclusion and discussion. So from our findings, it became clear we are still living in a material world. Materiality assessments are essential, maybe even more essential with the new European guidelines on reporting, the CSRD, etc. And it helps also to identify which sustainability issues are most important to the business and their stakeholders. Looking into that double materiality approach can be a very powerful tool for stakeholders to gain insight into how the company determines its sustainability strategy. And also stakeholder dialogue is typically the primary mechanism to inform the company's materiality assessment. Now, in our current conversation with the company, because we're still working with them, we suggest more the outward-looking sustainability approach while making sure the company discloses inward-looking ESG criteria. We also look into how we can adopt more the interpretation of materiality grounded in that idea of context-based sustainability, looking into that triple materiality approach. And this also means that metrics actually used in this context can be expressed relative to sustainability standards of performance. So the idea is here that standards must in turn be determined by reference to thresholds in the carrying capacities of vital capitals. And there the SDGs might work, or maybe the integrated reporting framework, which categorizes also vital capitals. That might be also interesting for future research. And then maybe a final reflection. Also, my reflection when doing this research, while working with this company, in really order to stimulate organizations to align their materiality analysis with new regulations, the Green Deal, taxonomy, the SDGs, new methodologies, such as the SDG materiality method can or should be developed. These methodologies can help to encourage organizations to bring the SDG center stage, recognizing also the need for organizations to contribute to the societal challenges beyond their immediate interest. But for sure, and that's an important sentence, these analyses are still in an early phase of development, and knowledge on how to conduct such analysis may be lacking, and future efforts, or maybe also the lack thereof, may indicate whether or not companies consider such analysis as sufficient relevance. So I'll end it here, and I'll look forward to any questions or reflections.
Great stuff, Jan. And we're really getting around this question, getting to this question of what language are we speaking, right? And are we able to compare and really kind of show in ways that others are doing? What's the impact? And this is what the SDGs, of course, are partly about. Thank you very much for that. You had one question a little bit earlier in the chat about, I don't know, Duncan, whether you want to just open up your mic and speak to that, or whether we've covered it already.
Yeah, that's fine. I can ask it. Yeah, thank you very much for an interesting and very relevant presentation. So my question is really when you were sort of having your 5-step process and you put the sort of the SDG, paying attention to the SDGs at the very end. So I was just thinking, would anything happen to the process of dialogue and information gathering if you actually included the SDGs sort of earlier on, or do they have to be separated into a final step? So that's just my kind of question.
And thank you for that. And as you go to answer that question, Jan, there's 2 more questions, and if we're really fast, we might get through them all.
Yeah, I'll answer very fast. Very good idea, Duncan. And actually, this is not part of the research as such, but like I mentioned, we work together with the company for 2 years, 2.5 years now. And in the initial steps, we also dived into the SDGs. In the sense that for the internal stakeholders, they got training on the SDGs. What do the SDGs mean? How can we use the SDGs in the initial stage, etc. But maybe it's good to also line that up in the steps that I visualized. That's a good idea.
Thanks, Eddie.
Yes, thank you very much for the presentation. My question is very, very simple. Looking at the materiality matrix, I was wondering what position would return on investment take on that table?
Return on investment. How long do I have, Maury, for answering this question?
Sorry.
Yeah, it's a relevant question, of course, and nowadays, like, these materiality assessments are becoming so popular. But the question is, what is it the process that is more important, or the outcome, or both? And what is then eventually the like I had heard in the other session, in the other track, engaging stakeholders, going to dialogue with them to look into your future ambitions and your future strategy together. I think that's the main idea of it. And while taking into account these global challenges is something that a lot of organizations are still in their infancy phase, in my opinion, ones that we are working with. So business case is enough, I think. But yeah, going on this topic with a future state of mind is very important, I think.
And even in business schools, we're teaching about, what is return on investment, what time period we're talking about, et cetera. No, really good. Thank you. And Christian.
Yeah, thank you very much for your interesting presentation. If I got it right, in your materiality matrix, the one that you showed us, the graph, I saw that many of the SDGs were or had a great relevance for the stakeholders, but apparently don't have too much impact, right? So I wonder, like, because most of them were on that side of the chart, right? So I wonder, like, how would you explain that? And, like, I don't know, how do you also, like, move companies if they are fall in that place? Probably they will not, like, take care of them and include them in their strategy. So I wonder if you have any comments or conclusions about that, and based on your close relationship with the company.
Yeah, very good question also. I think indeed all the SDGs are relevant. If you ask this question to stakeholders, you'll find a balance between the different SDGs. And as a first step in our consultation with the stakeholders, we really only looked at the SDGs. And I didn't show that in a slide, but we developed kind of a SDG matrix. So that's not really a materiality matrix, but just asking questions: what are the main SDGs to go towards a sustainable society? So very general. And then you see one angle, and then you see, okay, what is then the impact that the company can take on these SDGs? And then you see, like, a different angle. And with that information, we use that information to build further on this SDG materiality matrix. So we're really experimenting with this, but it gave a lot of insights on how stakeholders looked at the SDGs with the different aspects. And of course, that's I think also the problem. All the SDGs are relevant. All the SDGs are priorities. But while going to dialogue on these global topics with stakeholders, by deep diving, and that's why the dialogue section is very important, the company can fine-tune their ideas on what, for example, good health and well-being might mean, or sustainable consumption and production. And I think that's very important.
That's great stuff. Thank you so much, Jan. And I hope we can come back to this later in the conversation, and also tomorrow. crucial stuff. Let me just turn over now to because I know he has to go a few minutes before we finish. My colleague Gregory Unruh from George Mason, and who has been working a long time on these and similar issues, and in particular with the Doing Good model from Arison Group. So Greg, thanks for joining us, and maybe you can talk a little bit about the model and how we sort of bridge between the different sectors that are using it.
Great. Well, thanks, Maury. It's great to see you and great to see everyone else. It's good to be here. I noticed that there is going to be another session, or at least proposed, that we're going to have today on the Doing Good model, where representatives from the organization that is promoting the model will be speaking. That's in a different session today. So I'll talk more generally about the values-based approach behind the Doing Good models, and what we learned from observing the implementation process of the Doing Good models across a variety of companies and nonprofit organizations. I do want to talk, though, about the materiality piece very quickly, because we wrote an interesting article piece on this in the MIT Sloan Management Review about the evolution of materiality, and it's always been stakeholder-based, right? Financial materiality is shareholder-based. Whatever is the impact of any kind of material change going to impact the financial potentials of the company in any kind of material way. That's shareholder-based. We move then to stakeholder materiality, and that's the materiality matrix. You're bringing in stakeholders. That's fine. But you have to be very careful that you're including all the stakeholders. There are marginalized and fringe stakeholders that may not have power or the ability to get their perspectives put forward. And we have stakeholders, non-human stakeholders, that don't have a voice, the other species, the environment. And then, we argued, and it sounded a little bit like you were talking about, was maybe the question is really a way to expand it is something we call contribution materiality. And that is, what material contribution can a specific company make to a specific sustainability challenge? And, many companies can make anybody can write a check, right? And that makes some kind of contribution, but that's not making necessarily a material contribution. Some companies control assets or resources that are vital. They're a piece of the puzzle. I remember the pharmaceutical industry with the problem of HIV/AIDS in Africa. They were saying, it's a horrible problem, but we don't have any, role to say. We're not the government. We don't have, really any influence. But they had monopoly control over the medicines, over the solution, right? They were the monopolistic owners through their intellectual property. So if that problem was going to be solved through treatment, then the pharmaceutical industry was going to be drawn in. So they were materially involved. Similarly, you look at Facebook, the problems of privacy, political interference, misinformation. Facebook is monopoly owners of that platform. So any of those problems being produced by social media can only be addressed either voluntarily or involuntarily by the contributions made to this platform. So it's just an extension and a way to think about this material question, moving away about the interests of specific stakeholder groups to, what contribution can the specific organization make to tackling a specific set of sustainability problems. So I'm fascinated by the materiality question, so I really appreciated hearing the previous session. So let me talk really quickly about values. The Doing Good model is a set of 13 values that was created primarily through the initiative of Sherry Arison, who is an American-Israeli philanthropist and business owner. And she, at the time, was leading the Arison Group, which was a holding company that had controlling stakes in several large businesses, as well as some nonprofit organizations. And her goal was to imbue all of these different organizations from these different sectors with a common set of values. So the first question you could probably ask, well, why do that? What is the managerial utility of values? Why should companies have values? And fundamentally, what they are from a managerial perspective is there an additional set of decision-making criteria. When you have values, you value one thing more than another, right? And so there's some kind of hierarchy there, and that, you know, you'll have your explicit decision-making policies, but then there'll always be contingent situations where your explicit policies don't speak to that a specific situation, and that's where values can come in and come to play. If you don't have an elaborated additional set of values, that doesn't mean your organization, your company doesn't have values. It has these non-explicit values, which are fundamentally embedded in, you know, the philosophy and zeitgeist of business. You know, their financial values, their values of economic efficiency, their profitability. So if you know, when we say it's just business, as if business is, you know, values free, that's a complete misnomer. Business as a discipline and as a practice is values laden. We're so used to it, it's like fish in the water, we don't see it anymore. So what we do then with, you know, an additional values structure like the doing good models is bring another set of decision-making criteria. And the process by which we observed with the DGM process, it was across, I believe, 9 different organizations, some from banking, some from construction, some from arts philanthropy. You know, we sort of watched this process, and there were, you know, in terms of the actual what was going on behind the scenes, the values implementation process had 2 levels. One is the values and the process itself created something that sociologists called superordinate goals. And so these are goals, they're sort of higher level goals that can unify people beyond their discrete individual interests, right? I have my own personal interests, my organization has its own interests, but these values can create a set of superordinate goals that allow us to contribute to something greater than ourselves, to go beyond ourselves. And that has a unifying effect. There's a unifying force. It becomes a cultural touchstone, and the people feel this mutual commitment to the values and what they represent, which can be very powerful. It's you know, that's one of the challenges in any organization. You have different silos. You have the people in HR who are trying to make it difficult for you to hire whoever you're trying to hire. You have the bean counters there. You have the risk people trying to stop you from that merger or acquisition, whatever. So these kinds of values, use of values, creating superordinate goals that can unify these disparate interests in an organization was really powerful. And then on an individual level, the values create what are known as relational contracts. So we have legal contracts, which is the way normally we engage other businesses, or we engage employees. We do it through a legal contractual process through the legal system. Relational contracts are commitments that we're made and that have an emotional, social component. That it cannot be legally enforced, but those social and emotional sort of things that bind us together make these relational contracts quite powerful. So these values then get shared and foster mutual commitments among the people in the organization, not only to the higher values, but to one another. And when managed effectively, this can be a very powerful way to strengthen, build a unifying culture, not just within a single organization, as we saw, but then across multiple organizations in different sectors and industries. So it was a really fascinating approach, and it contrasted with a value, the typical, or not a typical, but often the mission, vision, values approach we see, where the executive committee will go on a retreat or something, and they'll have some kind of vision quest and come up with a set of values, and they'll come back to the organization, and it's sort of, Moses coming down off the mountains with the values, or the benign dictator, and saying, hey, these are the values of the organization. That can have an impact, but it really misses out on the process and culture building possibilities that values and a value implementation process can achieve. So, and if you're interested in that, we'll actually have representatives later today from the DGM organization to talk about it from their perspective.
Yeah, and maybe you put the website in the chat before you go, Greg. people want to have a look.
Will do.
Questions for Gregory? Interesting stuff, because you know, if you care about how you measure what your business is doing, of course, at the kind of primary global level, there's SDGs, and Jan has set out for us some of the questions about how do we properly connect those, and then at the kind of business owner, you know, level of how do I approach what my family has built, or what our set of businesses is. You see, and the DGM is a particularly, doing good model is a particularly well thought out version of this. You know, the approach of a pure, really, business owner. Listen, thank you so much, Greg, and I get to run, and I will now, with pleasure, turn it over to our third speaker, who is Marcelo Reina from Tecnológico de Monterrey. And what's I think really compelling here is now we're going to go to reputation, reputational capital, and it's really complementary to some of the other things we've been talking about. So over to you.
Okay, let me share the screen. Sorry.
Great.
Sorry. Hello, everyone. My name is Marcia Rodriguez. I'm here with my colleagues, Lilia Lopez and Lucia Rodriguez. We are here to share with you our work about reputational capital. We are working on this paper. It's not finished yet. It's exploring the impact of SMEs conscious capitalism on practices on reputational capitals. We are from Tecnológico de Monterrey in Campus Guadalajara in Mexico. So first, before giving you this introduction, until this point, you have talked about big corporations, huge enterprises. So the context in Mexico, it's a little bit different. So we are focused on SMEs. So you will see why in a bit. And small and medium enterprises, as you know, play a key role in every country. They impact on the social welfare of each nation. In Mexico, SMEs represent 99% of the registered companies, which are 6 million business units. And this generates 72% of the jobs, and they contribute with us 52% of the GDP. That's why we are focused on SMEs. SMEs' survival and development are related to how they manage the scarce resources they possess, such as reputation, which is a critical and delicate asset. So reputation is a critical resource for companies in emerging markets, and it may enhance their financial performance, it may provide access to other intangible resources to create value, and it may contribute to their competitiveness. Therefore, identifying which factors may contribute to reputational capital in SMEs through a quantitative perspective remains a relevant stream of research. We work in a theoretical background focused on the next definition of reputational capital because it has many definitions. So we are focused on having others believe that an organization is reliable and or provides consistently high quality advice, information, labor, goods or services. It is a social form of capital. It is not physical, not embodied in the organizations who possess it. Our reputation depends on the beliefs and perceptions of other people in the society. It presents value of firm surplus when their counterparties trust them. And CSR may contribute as a reputation building tool because, well, we now focus to conscious business because it's like a branch evolved from CSR. Conscious business have been defined as those that have a higher purpose than just the maximization of profits and or shareholders' returns. and it emphasizes on creating value for all stakeholders.
So continuing with this theoretical point of view of Cisoria, we are going to conscious business with the 4 pillars that Cisoria established. The first one, higher purpose, which calls for a more transcendent essence of the business, further than maximizing the profits. It responds to the call of playing a key role in healing the humankind and the planet for the power to provide prosperity and health for everyone. Stakeholders integration is the second pillar of Cisoria's conscious business, capitalism, and it is tying stakeholders and shareholders' interests and articulating them with the needs and interests of the organization as a task that is in the center of the organizational design, which materializes the company's strategy. The third pillar is conscious leadership. Leaders who are motivated by the pursuit of the higher purpose of the organization, as well as that of the stakeholders, and not only pursue the personal power or enrichment. They see themselves as trustees of business, and their task is to nurture and preserve it for future generations. Finally, the fourth pillar is conscious culture. And Cisoria says that a healthy culture creates a sense of community that reflects in high levels of participation and decision-making and sharing the business and ownership of the company. The idea of Cisoria and Maki is to go further, trying to reconcile caring for community and environment and profitability through a culture of trust and accountability and caring. So we are basing on these 4 pillars and to set these research questions. How is reputational capital influenced by these 4 pillars that compose conscious business practices? How do they have an impact on the reputational capital?
So hi everyone, I'm going to continue now with the methodology. So what we did in this study was to, following a quantitative approach, cross-sectional study, we built an online survey and sent it to a database of 250 SMEs. All of them are partners of the Tecnológico de Monterrey, located in the western region of the country. At the end, we got 115 valid responses. This happened last July, mainly. And regarding the respondents, 45% were females, 48% of them were between 29 to 40 years, and well, mainly 70% were directors of the SMEs, which is explained because of the size of the companies that responded to our survey. Regarding the SMEs, 31% were more than 20 years old, 53 had fewer than 10 employees, and 56 were engaged in services, 31 in commerce or retail, and 13 were manufacturers. So as you can see, the sample was interesting. It's representative of the way in which the economy is moving in the region here in Mexico. Well, regarding the survey, it was difficult for us to find a way to measure reputational capital. So we decided to come up with a couple of items based on Behrens and Van Riel, Jackson, List, and Wartic, following the framework that was explained by Lore before. So that's the way we measure reputational capital. And the 4 pillars, well, we follow the conscious capitalism summary audit from Cisoria. Well, once that we had the data, we cleaned it and we tested. So at the end, we got convergent and discriminant validity for all the constructs. We ran multicollinearity test and also the cross-loading test. So at the end, everything looks good. So we tested the research model by using a structural equation modeling. In particular, we use Smart PLS because of the number of responses that we got. Next, please. Our results show that hypothesis 1 is supported, so higher purpose, and also hypothesis 4 is supported, which means conscious culture also affects reputational capital, and both variables or constructs explain 41% of the extracted variance of our main dependent variable. Interestingly, conscious leadership and conscious culture were not statistically significant in this, and for this particular sample, I mean. The biggest effect, sorry about that, the largest effect is with conscious culture, explaining, well, with a beta of 130%. I mean, 30% beta. So that's it.
Well, our findings suggest that the SME's reputational capital may be developed by declaring a business hyper-purpose on a conscious culture, but not necessarily developing practice for a stakeholder orientation for having a conscious leadership. This was something really surprising for us. We didn't expect this result, but well, this is leading us for further research. We hypothesize that leadership and stakeholder integration might have an indirect significance because they could be acting as a mediating or moderating variable for higher purpose and for higher purpose and conscious culture, respectively. So that's where we think we're going further in this research. Also, we discussed that SMEs must recognize what makes them unique and discover the way they can best serve the community in order to have and define a higher purpose. One approach to accomplish the task is to root the realization of the higher purpose through the company's core values as guiding principles. SMEs could also create a conscious culture based on trust and accountability and caring, in which justice for all stakeholders is a priority for their leaders. The attribution for doing so could be a higher reputational capital, which may enhance their competitiveness and provide legitimacy and access to other resources.
So our conclusions, our main conclusions are that firstly, this study explores conscious capitalism through Custodia's conscious capitalism summary audit, which has been proposed as an assessment through which organizations can understand where they are standing in order to start a transformational journey. Also, it's important to tell you that we didn't find any quantitative assessment for measuring this. So it's like, maybe it's like new, we don't know, we're still working on this. And secondly, this study contributes new knowledge with regards to how reputational capital can be built from a conscious business perspective. We suggest as further research lines, the next. SMEs face more intensively vulnerability to uncertainty. And as you see in Mexico, it's a very relevant topic because they contribute they are 90% of SMEs in Mexico. So to the lack of knowledge on them and to a higher dependence to the flow and variation of public policies and economy, it's important to remain studying them. And the impact of SMEs in almost all economies is undeniable. So it is important to continue to investigate how conscious capitalism practices can affect SMEs' reputational capital and other resources in various contexts. So thank you very much. So we are ready for your questions.
That's great. Thank you so much, Marcia, and Lucia. This is great stuff, and I'm curious what other people are thinking in terms of both what this study, how the study is put together, what the topic is, but also how you would do some of these metrics. They have basically said, well, there's nothing out there that we've seen that gives us a quantitative approach to the reputational capital. So what do people think? Any comments, questions, or examples? Or maybe this expertise is not at the table at the moment. That's but when you tried, so you have looked, right? What? Oh, okay. Wait, sorry, Christian, you have your hand up again.
Yeah. Well, we come from the same university. Thank you, the team, the research team. But in fact, our university has been exploring these concepts, right? But I think it happens something similar to stakeholder capitalism because, like, we have all these principles, but when it comes to practice, it's not necessarily something that we have grasped and we have projected that into the academic world. So I think it's like the operationalization of all these constructs is still a work in progress, right? So I congratulate the team for trying to make this a more rigorous research, right? So that we can advance and know how this can also like maybe translate to practice, because I think that's the challenge, to jump from the theory to the practical aspects, because in the end we want businesses to have impact, right? Positive impact.
We know that reputational capital is real, and it has, among other things, market value, right? So this is not just conceptual. This is also a very practical approach. Well, I want to thank you, you guys, and all of our presenters today. We have a lot of interesting research, and all of it is about making things happen in practice, which, because I was originally an engineer before I went back to do my business studies, it's very dear to my heart, but it's also something our students require and our colleagues more and more care about. So great stuff, guys. Great session. Thank you so much. I think we go back now to the main room.